Hey, and welcome back to another installment of AJN Checkpoint Extras. Smaller campfires, same nerd energy. I'm Nate, your resident boogeyman. And since it's Nerdoween, I figured we'd strike a match for the show that taught an entire generation how to enjoy being afraid. The one that made mirrors feel suspicious, attics feel haunted, and every indoor swimming pool feel like a terrible idea. I even shouted it out in the last Checkpoint Extra. You know the one. Nickelodeon's Are You Afraid of the Dark? I think I was 7 or maybe 8 when I first discovered it. I was tuned into what every 90s kid was watching on the weekends Saturday Night Nickelodeon, or Snick. And one night, right after The Secret World of Alex Mack and all that, I saw a commercial. Kids around a campfire telling me to tune in to the new season premiere and to stay close to the light. And there was the title Are You Afraid of the Dark? And that was it. Game over. Saturday nights at 8:30 were booked. Blanket pulled up, cereal bowl half full, volume turned down just low enough that my mom or grandma wouldn't think I was watching some R-rated horror flick. I'd act brave, sure, but you better believe I checked that closet before bedtime. And that's the thing about 90s Nickelodeon. It made the weird feel like home. We had Ren and Stimpy for gross out chaos, Pete and Pete for suburban surrealism, Clarissa for the rebels. And then, at the end of the block, came Are You Afraid of the Dark? Snick wasn't just a lineup, it was a mood. Dim lights, neon bumpers, the sense that Nickelodeon had handed you the remote and said, All right, kid, you can stay up with the big kids now. And somehow this little Canadian co production became its beating heart. Are You Afraid of the Dark was the brainchild of DJ McHale and Ned Candle, two guys who basically walked into Nickelodeon and said, We want to make Twilight Zone Junior. Nick looked at them like they'd lost it. This was the network of slime and game shows, not seances. But McHale argued that kids already loved being scared. They just didn't have a place where it was okay. He called it bedtime stories for lazy parents. The executives laughed. Then the Halloween pilot aired in 91 and pulled numbers none of them expected. And by 92, it was official. Snick had its first horror anthology series. Now here's where the Canadian magic really comes in. Nick partnered with Cinar, the same Montreal studio that did Madeline and the Busy World of Richard Scarry, which is hilarious when you really think about it. Those cozy storybook animators suddenly pivoting to fog-soaked cemeteries and evil clowns. They filmed almost everything around Montreal and Ontario. Real woods, real cold. The breath you see in those night scenes, that's not special effects. That's freezing Canadian air hitting underpaid teenage actors. And that midnight dust they threw in the fire every episode, just powdered coffee creamer mixed with glitter. Safe, cheap, and flammable enough to make that signature whoosh. The concept itself was genius in its simplicity. A secret club, the Midnight Society, that meets in the woods to tell ghost stories. Every week, a different member takes the stage, tosses that glitter bomb into the fire, and says the line we all know by heart. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story. And in that moment, the camera tilts up, the music creeps in, and boom, you're in the tale. That ritual made us feel like we were part of something bigger. It wasn't just television, it was initiation, a shared secret between whoever was brave enough to stay up until 9 p.m. And that's what I loved about it. Other shows kind of talked at kids, but Are You Afraid of the Dark talked with us. It trusted that we could handle a story that didn't end with a tidy morale or a laugh track. Sometimes the hero lost, and sometimes the ghost won, and somehow that felt completely honest. And I think that's why it clicked, because when you're a kid, you're surrounded by fear you can't put a name on yet. You don't know what taxes or heartbreak is, but you do know what it feels like when the lights go out and something creaks. Are You Afraid of the Dark said, yeah, we feel that too, so let's talk about it. The show's structure was tight, but flexible. You'd get 22 minutes, setup, creep, payoff. A kid finds a cursed object, breaks a rule, learns a lesson. The horror was rarely random. It was karmic. Mess with what you don't understand, mock the wrong person, ignore the warning, the dark will answer. And yet, it wasn't moralizing. It was empathy through fear. That's why you could cry and scream in the same episode. Behind the camera, they were inventing tricks on the fly. Most episodes cost less than a single day of shooting on Clarissa Explains It All. So they compensated with atmosphere, blue gel lighting, dry ice fog, and clever camera angles. McHale once said their rule was show the monster only long enough to make the audience fill in the rest. And it absolutely worked. You can still feel that analog dread, the grain, the hiss, the sense that something's off in the frame. That's the secret sauce. You don't just watch Are You Afraid of the Dark? You remember it like a dream you might have actually had. So let's talk about how Are You Afraid of the Dark actually worked. Because the beauty of that show isn't just in the stories, it's in the craft. Every episode followed this rhythm that was equal parts fairy tale and fever dream. First, they'd give you a kid you recognized, maybe the new kid at school, the shy one, the prankster. Then they'd hand that kid a problem that felt real, being ignored, feeling guilty, wanting to belong, and slide a supernatural metaphor on top of it. It wasn't random horror, it was emotional horror. You could almost hear the writers asking, what if guilt had a face? What if loneliness could knock on your window? That's what made it sting. And the pacing was slow, deliberately. They built tension like a bedtime story told by someone who enjoyed watching you squirm. Long silences, wide camera shots where something might move, a sudden violin stab, then nothing at all. And because the show aired in that grainy 4:3 CRT blur, your imagination filled in the blanks. It wasn't the darkness that scared us. It was that the show let the darkness breathe. Now, nowhere is that clearer than in the tale of Laughing in the Dark, the one that traumatized an entire generation and made clowns a non-starter for the next 30 years. It opens on a summer afternoon at Playland Amusement Park, one of those faded carnivals that smells like popcorn, cotton candy, and nostalgia that's a little sticky around the edges. Josh, his best friend Ouija, and Ouija's little sister Kathy are wandering the midway, bouncing between games and rides, just killing time. And Josh isn't your typical brave hero kid. He's the mouthy friend, the one who hides fear behind attitude. He spends the whole first act clowning on Ouija and Kathy for being scared. He's flapping his arms, calling them chickens, the kind of kid you want to see get spooked just to humble him a bit. Then they step in front of the spook house, laughing in the dark. Kathy freezes. She's heard the stories. Ouija looks uneasy too, but Josh laughs at both of them, calls them chickens, flaps his arms, does the whole routine. And that's when they bump into him, the striped suit carny. And he looks like he hasn't slept since the early 1900s. Gravel voice, grin too wide. He tells Josh, pick the right door and you'll go free, but pick the wrong door and there he'll be. It's half dare, half curse, and it lands like a prophecy. Josh tries to play it cool, but the laugh doesn't quite reach his eyes. He mutters, yeah, maybe another time, and walks away. But that seed's been planted. And the next day, curiosity and ego get the better of them. Ouija and Kathy start digging into the funhouse's history and find the legend of Zeebo. You see, back in 1924, a clown named Zeebo stole the circus payroll, 4,000 bucks in cash, and ran into the original Laughing in the Dark to hide. He was a smoker, though, and while crouched in the dark, he drops his cigar. The place went up in flames, taking Zeebo with it. When they rebuilt the ride years later, they installed a Zeebo dummy at the end. Same suit, same grin, same cigars, as a joke. But the rumor stuck. His spirit never left the spook house. Ouija tells Josh the story, hoping it'll shut him up. Instead, Josh smirks. Ouija, tired of the attitude, fires back with a dare. If you're so brave, go through it alone. And to prove that he's done it, Josh declares he'll bring back Zeebo's nose as proof. And that night, they return, and Josh commits to going through the ride. Inside, it's all flickering lights, rubber masks, and monster noises echoing off the walls. You can feel the air thicken, that weird in-between space where the ride becomes something more. He reaches the end and faces the Zeebo dummy, frozen grin, red glowing eyes. Josh hesitates and almost bails, then smirks, pulls off the red nose and says, "Hope you can still smell your stinky cigars." He laughs his way out, proud, chest out. But as the camera pans back, smoke starts curling from under the door as a white light glows. That's the moment the story changes. So cut to later that night, and the whole thing turns into Poltergeist on a Nickelodeon budget. Josh gets home, his parents gone. He pops spaghetti in the microwave and starts digging into some chocolate pudding when a closet door creaks open, causing him to panic and drop the bowl of pudding. And then the phone rings. It's Ouija, calling to apologize for getting mad that Josh had won the bet and hoping Josh would let him off the hook. You see, because he conquered the maze in the beginning, Josh declared Ouija had to wear the nose to school. Of course, Josh says, "Nope, tomorrow is Zeebo day for you," and hangs up. The phone rings again. Thinking it's Ouija, Josh answers it. And a gravelly voice goes, "Give it back." Josh nervously laughs, thinking it's Ouija playing a prank. The microwave dings, he opens it, and inside are burnt cigars. He looks down. There's a footprint in the chocolate pudding, a perfect Z traced into the spill. He runs to his room and calls Ouija again, full-blown panic this time, but Ouija swears it's not him doing anything. Then another voice cuts in. "If you don't give it back, I'll come up and get it." Josh locks his door. Moments later, a purple balloon slides under the crack and inflates all on its own. Across it, "Give it back." It pops. And I'm telling you, that right there is top tier practical horror. No blood, no monster suit, just sound, light, and the realization that this kid really messed with something. So Josh does the only thing left. He goes back. He walks through that funhouse again. No jokes, no bravado, and returns the nose. He sets it down and says, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have taken it. I brought you cigars. They're all for you." He steps back. Silence. Then slow, hollow clapping. The exit door swings open. Zeebo forgives him. Josh walks out into the night, humbled. You don't beat a ghost. You respect it. Then that final shot, the carny puffing a cigar, whispering, "It's the most fun in the park when you're laughing in the dark." And that's when you realize he was Zeebo the whole time. Perfect ending. Spooky, moral, weirdly poetic. And here's a bit of trivia for you Midnight Society scholars. That striped suit carny, same actor who plays Dr. Vink with a vuh, the reoccurring mad genius who pops up in other episodes. So, technically, Zeebo and Vink share a face. Nickelodeon's first horror multiverse. Kevin Feige could never. And, real quick, side tangent, How in the hell did Josh get that box of cigars? He's what, 13? So we're supposed to believe he just strolls into a corner store like, hey, need a peace offering for a vengeful clown ghost. And the clerk's just like, sure thing, kid. Need matches with that? I mean, maybe his dad had a humidor. Maybe he bribed a paper boy. I don't even know. But every time I rewatch it, I crack up because that's peak 90s Nickelodeon logic. You can't say hell, but you can absolutely show a kid gifting cigars to a ghost. Perfect television. Also, the actor voicing Zeebo was actually a local stage performer. They recorded his laugh in an empty warehouse at 2 a.m. so it would echo naturally. No filters, no plugins, just pure acoustics and nightmare fuel. And the carnival set? That was a real defunct fairground north of Montreal. They rented it for 2 nights, patched the power through a generator, and shot until sunrise. The fog wasn't theatrical, it was breath and cold air mixing. And when you watch it now, it still holds up. Not because the clown looks scary, no, honestly, he looks like a rejected Chuck E. Cheese prop, but because the episode weaponizes your own memory. Every kid's been dared to go first, to prove they're not afraid. This one just asked, okay, what if the dare follows you home? And if Zeebo taught us to fear laughter, Dead Man's Float taught us to fear the deep end of the swimming pool. This one wasn't about pranks or curses. It was about guilt, grief, and what happens when the past doesn't stay buried. Literally. The story opens with a flashback to 1954. Warm daylight, old school swim caps, the echo of a pool that's seen better days. A young boy named Joe jumps into the water while his lifeguard, Charlie Dempster, flirts with his girlfriend, who also happens to be Joe's older sister. Classic setup: innocence, distraction, and a hint of rot beneath the surface. Joe swims, but suddenly he smells something. Not chlorine, something foul, almost like sulfur. Then the water churns, and something invisible grabs him. He screams, thrashes, calls for help, and Charlie dives in, but it's too late. The camera lingers just long enough on the rippling water to let you feel that cold pit in your stomach. Then the screen fades to black. Cut to modern day, or as modern as 1994 gets, where we meet Zeke, the awkward science nerd whose volcano project just exploded all over the classroom. He's clumsy, brilliant, a little lonely, and of course, he's got a crush on Clarice, the confident swimmer who doesn't have time for geeks. And like any Are You Afraid of the Dark setup, their connection is what gets them into trouble. Zeke's curiosity leads him to uncover a forgotten pool behind a false wall in the boys' locker room. The door literally says, "to pool." They pry it open, step inside, and find a drained pool hidden beneath decades of dust and tarps. It's like uncovering a tomb. He doesn't know it, but this is the same pool Joe drowned in, and the same lifeguard, Charlie, now the school's custodian, still walks those halls, carrying that guilt like a ghost of his own. When Clarice convinces the school to reopen the pool, you already know it's doomed. The second she dives in with her friend Greta, the camera cuts to the water's point of view. Something watching. And that smell returns. That same thick, oily stench that once filled the air in 1954. Greta jokes about dirty pipes, but the audience, we know. When the creature finally attacks, the show drops the pretense. It's invisible, acidic, sentient water. It grabs, burns, and suffocates its victims in total silence except for those distorted, gurgling sounds. And for a kid's show, it's straight up terrifying. Now, here's where Dead Man's Float goes from monster of the week to masterpiece. This isn't just a ghost story. It's a science experiment gone to hell. Zeke and Clarice decide to fight the thing logically. They mix chemicals, test pH levels, turn fear into chemistry class. It's such a brilliant metaphor, knowledge versus the unknown. And when they finally pour methyl orange into the pool, That invisible thing becomes visible. The water turns red. The shape starts to form, and it's horrifying. A skeletal, bloated corpse, flesh like wet paper glowing from within. The moment it emerges, you can practically feel the air leave the room. It's one of the few times Are You Afraid of the Dark actually shows its monster. And they nail it. Charlie, the same guy who lost Joe 40 years earlier, sees the thing again and freezes. You can see it all in his face. That guilt never left him. And when he realizes it's real, that he wasn't crazy all those years ago, there's this quiet redemption. He gets to help the kids defeat the same evil that destroyed his life. Clarice remembers Zeke's earlier experiment. Manganite and water equals a chemical explosion. So she grabs the compound, throws it into the pool, and the corpse screams, boils, and dissolves into steam. Science defeats superstition. Knowledge conquers fear. It's the most satisfying kind of victory. Earned, not given. And the kicker? It's still haunting. Because when the camera pans back to that empty pool, the red water is gone, but the smell still lingers. That's the show telling you some ghosts never leave completely. Also, can we talk about how extra this episode is for a kid's show? It opens with a child's death, has an undead acid corpse, a moral about guilt and responsibility, and somehow still sneaks in a nerdy love story. Like, this was Nickelodeon, not HBO. We were watching this right after Kenan and Kel and all that. And that's the genius of Are You Afraid of the Dark? It didn't care about what it was supposed to be, it just told the truth through metaphor. Every fear we carry as kids, drowning, rejection, guilt, those are the monsters that stay with us. And this one reminded us that even when you face your fears, you might still catch a whiff of them years later. And that creature design was done with tinted latex and air bubbles pumped through hidden tubes so it looked like the ghost was literally bleeding out of the water. They filmed it in a drained pool painted black, added milk to the water for cloudiness, and used a scuba-suited stunt performer with a bald cap and prosthetic jaw. $500 in materials, eternal trauma in return. And thematically, chef's kiss. The main kid is terrified of swimming. He freezes up in the shallow end, humiliated in front of his crush. But by the finale, he has to dive headfirst into haunted water to save her life. That's Are You Afraid of the Dark distilled to its essence. Fear, confrontation, transformation. Every scare doubles as therapy. I remember watching that one and deciding pools were off limits until further notice. To this day, indoor pools still have that same echo. Chlorine, tiles, and somewhere underneath it all, that faint hum of something waiting. It's amazing how one 22-minute story can reprogram an entire generation's relationship with aquatics. And you know a show's powerful when the YMCA loses business over it. Zeebo and the pool get all the glory, but the bench is deep. The tale of the lonely ghost, the girl trapped inside a mirror writing "Help me" backwards. That one hit on isolation and bullying. The tale of the ghastly grinner went full comic book horror before the mask was even a thing. And the tale of Station 109.1, that was death as after-school radio, existentialism with a punchline. What ties them all together is empathy. Every monster, every curse, every ghost, it's born from misunderstanding or pain. You don't just defeat it by running, you defeat it by listening. And that's the secret no one gives this show enough credit for. It made compassion a survival skill. And as much as those stories scared us, they also made us storytellers. Every kid who watched that show learned the rhythm of suspense. The pause before the reveal, the twist at the end, the satisfaction of the fire going out. I honestly think that's where I learned how to tell a story. Not from English class, but from sitting cross-legged in front of the TV watching a bunch of kids around a fire take turns trying to out-creep each other. That's storytelling in its purest form. No rules, no rubrics, just imagination and timing. And if you really think about it, that's what we're doing right now. Different fire, same ritual. We show up, tell stories, and hope somebody out there listening leans in a little closer to the glow. So let's talk about fear. Not the kind you get from jump scares or cheap shock. I'm talking about the slow, creeping kind. The kind Are You Afraid of the Dark specialized in. Now, you see, kids in the 90s weren't strangers to fear. We grew up during a decade obsessed with stranger danger, razor blades in our Halloween candy, and that one neighbor who everyone swore used to work for the circus. The news told us the world was dangerous. Nickelodeon told us it was mysterious. The show treated fear like a language. You could learn to read it, write it, and eventually speak it fluently enough to calm down. Every episode was a lesson in how to feel fear safely. 22 minutes of emotional exposure therapy disguised as after school entertainment. And it worked. Psychologists will tell you that safe fear, the kind you get from stories, not trauma, actually builds resilience. You get the adrenaline rush, but you also get the relief that follows. Your body learns that fear can end, that it can be survived. And that's what this show gave us. Practice. Practice being brave. Practice confronting something bigger than ourselves. When you strip away the ghosts and clowns, that's all it really was. Courage training for preteens. And here's the wild part. Nickelodeon needed that darkness. By the early 90s, the network had nailed the kids' rule attitude with game shows and cartoons, but kids were growing up. And there was this gap, a liminal space between Double Dare and MTV. So in 92, they invented Snick, the Saturday night Nickelodeon block. It was designed for that exact in-between age, when you were too old for Eureka's Castle, but still too young for Beavis and Butthead, even though we probably still watched it anyhow. And at the center of Snick sat Are You Afraid of the Dark? It balanced the lineup perfectly. You'd laugh with Roundhouse, chill with Clarissa, get weird with Ren and Stimpy, then end the night with Ghosts. That rhythm made Nickelodeon feel like a complete world, messy, funny, and sometimes completely frightening. Behind the scenes, the execs were nervous. There were debates about what counted as too scary. One story, The Tale of the Prom Queen, almost got cut because it dealt with death too directly. But audiences loved it. Letters poured in from kids thanking the show for not talking down to them. DJ McHale later said Nickelodeon's motto became "Trust the Kids," and that's exactly what they did. They gave us responsibility for our own goosebumps, and the timing couldn't have been better. Culturally, America was coming off of the 80s satanic panic. Parents were paranoid about horror corrupting their children. You couldn't walk through a video store without someone clutching their pearls at Child's Play 3. So when Nickelodeon greenlit a horror anthology for kids, it was quietly rebellious. It said fear isn't the enemy, ignorance is. That's punk rock television, baby, and it aired right between slime commercials. Of course, Are You Afraid of the Dark didn't exist in a vacuum. It was part of this whole ecosystem of gateway horror. Around the same time, Goosebumps was turning R.L. Stine's paperbacks into mini movies. Erie, Indiana was blending suburbia with the Twilight Zone weirdness. And Courage the Cowardly Dog was sneaking existential dread into Cartoon Network. But each had its own flavor of fear. Goosebumps was pulp, fast, ironic, built for cliffhangers. It was, what if your goldfish was a demon? And surprise, your teacher's a monster. Great fun, but deliberately cartoonish. Erie, Indiana was satire. Think Twin Peaks for middle schoolers. Every episode poked fun at consumerism and conformity. It was paranoia with punchlines. Courage came later and went abstract, fear as art. It didn't explain the horror, it just let you live in it, which is somehow worse. But Are You Afraid of the Dark sat right in the middle. It had empathy. It wasn't mocking you for being scared, it was sitting next to you saying, "Hey buddy, me too." That tone is why it lasted, why we still talk about it. why Zeebo the Clown is still a pop culture boogeyman 30 years later. And man, from a filmmaking standpoint, the show was absolutely brilliant. They had pennies for budgets, so they learned to weaponize the atmosphere. Those deep blue gels that drenched everything in midnight tones, that was a lighting trick borrowed from cheap 80s music videos. They'd shoot with just enough haze that you could feel the air. They framed shots wide, giving the actors too much space. That's why you're always waiting for something to crawl out of the corner. They dropped the audio level a few decibels so you subconsciously leaned forward. Classic tension manipulation. And the sound design, come on, that flute synth theme still sounds like it was recorded by ghosts. Jeff Zahn layered breathy woodwinds with metallic reverb to make a sound that's equal parts lullaby and warning. Even the editing rhythm was deliberate. A lot of scenes cut a second late, just long enough for your brain to ask, hey, wait a minute, why aren't we still on this shot? That half-second unease is where the scare lives. They didn't have CGI back then. They had fog machines, flashlights, and imagination. And honestly, that made it timeless. Digital horror dates itself. Analog fear never does. And that's the difference between Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark? Visually, Goosebumps looked like a stage play. Bright sets, neon monsters, quick pacing. Are You Afraid of the Dark looked like a dream you half remembered from a fever. You could almost smell the damp leaves through the screen. That's why even now, when people talk about 90s horror aesthetics, they're basically describing this show. The blues, the haze, the quiet. It was comfortingly creepy. So, what happens when you relight an old campfire? When you dig through the ashes of your childhood and try to spark it again? That's basically the story of Are You Afraid of the Dark after the 90s. The original run wrapped in 96. By then, the kids who'd grown up watching it were teenagers, maybe even sneaking R-rated rentals from Blockbuster. Nickelodeon thought the moment had passed, but fear doesn't retire, it just changes costumes. In 99, they brought it back. New cast, new tone, new century. Gary's younger brother Tucker took over the society. The literal passing of the torch. The stories were a little slicker, a little faster, more effects, less grain, but the heart was still there. And there's something poetic about that. A younger sibling carrying on the fire. That's what the reboots have always been, the next generation's turn to hold the match. Now fast forward to 2019. Nickelodeon drops a trailer, cinematic, modern, dramatic. Are You Afraid of the Dark? Reborn as a limited series. 3 parts, new Midnight Society, bigger budget. And it looked incredible. You could tell they'd studied the source material, the woods, the firelight, the sense of ritual. Only now it was filmed with drones and Dolby surround sound. The difference was scale. Instead of an anthology, it became one continuous story. The society versus the carnival of doom. They finally put the storytellers inside their own nightmare. I remember watching that first episode, and halfway through, I realized this wasn't made for kids, it was made for us. The ones who used to sit cross-legged on the carpet pretending the living room was the forest. The 2019 version understood the assignment, nostalgia with new stakes. And the cast, they were great, diverse, funny, awkward in the right ways. You could tell they'd grown up on Stranger Things and Goosebumps, but their DNA was still pure Nickelodeon weird. The next 2 seasons, Curse of the Shadows and Ghost Island, leaned even more cinematic. Ghosts, secret societies, cursed lighthouses, bigger stories, older characters. It's Are You Afraid of the Dark through the lens of modern anxiety. But even with all the polish, the new ones still keep one thing sacred. The fire. That simple image, a circle of kids in the dark taking turns being brave. That's the thread connecting 1992 to our present day. What's wild is how much this show predicted the era we're currently in. Back then, it was just campfire stories. Now we call it content creation. Back then, kids gathered to tell tales. Now we gather on podcasts, Twitch, YouTube. Same instinct? different glow. The Midnight Society walked so streamers and storytellers could run. And nostalgia itself, that's a form of magic. We keep lighting the same fire because it reminds us who we were. Are You Afraid of the Dark doesn't just scare us, it anchors us. It says you're still that kid with the flashlight, and that's 100% okay. That's why it works even after all these years. Fear evolves, but ritual doesn't. We tell the story, toss in the dust, and listen to the crackle. If you trace the bloodline of modern genre storytelling, you'll find Are You Afraid of the Dark? Fingerprints everywhere. Mike Flanagan, creator of Haunting of Hill House, called it one of the best horror writing classrooms of all time. Filmmakers who grew up on it learned tension from those Campfire episodes. Even shows like Stranger Things and The Midnight Club owe it a nod. Ensemble kids facing darkness, ritualized storytelling, emotional fear, that all started here. And beyond creators, look at the fans, the cosplay, the TikToks, the YouTube retrospectives breaking down the symbolism of Zeebo's cigar. This show became a shared language. We all watched it in different houses, but the glow on our faces was the same. That's community. That's culture. So maybe that's why this show still matters, because Are You Afraid of the Dark was never really about the ghosts. It was about what happens when you tell a story and someone listens. When fear turns into connection. That's what I think about every time I hit record. It's the same Campfire, just digital now. Different flames, same warmth. So yeah, the fire still burns, because every October my kids and I have our own little tradition. We fire up Paramount Plus or pull out the old DVDs. We dim the lights and binge Are You Afraid of the Dark all over again. And every single year, it hits me the same way. They sit there on the couch, blanket fort, snacks everywhere, trying to act brave. But the minute Zeebo shows up, gone. Blanket over the head. When the red ghost rises and dead man's float, they yell the same thing I did at their age. Why would you go back into the pool? And I just sit there grinning like an idiot because I see myself in them. That same mix of fear and fascination, the exact feeling that got me hooked on this stuff all those years ago. It's surreal watching them experience those same scares. It's like seeing your own memories replayed with better snacks. And it reminds me why I fell in love with stories like this in the first place. Because they're how we pass things down. Not just fear, but imagination, wonder, curiosity. The understanding that a good story can make the dark a little less lonely. So every October when we hit play and that flute theme starts, it's not just a show anymore. It's a ritual. The fire's still burning, just in my living room now. So now it's your turn. Tell me your campfire tale. What episode haunts you? What moment made you turn off the TV and immediately turn it back on because curiosity beat out that fear? Email me your stories to averagejoenerdcast@gmail.com or drop them in the comments. I'll read the best ones on the next Nerdoween drop, and maybe, just maybe, we'll add them to the Midnight Society archives. And that's going to do it for this one. If this episode brought back memories, if you could hear that flute theme in your head or smell the campfire smoke, do me a favor. Rate, review, and share the show. Feed the algorithm god so more nerds can find their way back to the woods. Shout out to my player 2. Thank you for keeping the lights on while I dig through these ghost stories. Shout out to Cap for reminding me that nostalgia is just another kind of magic. Shout out to my brother holding the AJN fort down. And Pickle, do not, under any circumstance, steal that clown's nose. And shout out to all of you. Thank you. Whether you've been listening since the first deep dive or you just stumbled into the fire today, you're the reason I get to keep doing this. Every play, every share, every message you send, it all helps keep this weird little campfire burning. You're all a part of the Midnight Society now, and as long as you keep showing up, the fire's never going out. Stay gold, nerd bold, stay spooky, and I'll see all of you at the next campfire.